I think part of what we're seeing is actually the rise of a form of female totalitarianism. So we have no idea what totalitarianism would be like if women ran it, because that's never happened before in the history of the planet. And so we've introduced women into the political sphere radically over the last 50 years. We have no idea what the consequence of that is going to be, but we do know from our research, which is preliminary, that agreeableness really predicts political correctness, but female gender predicts over and above the personality trait, and that's something we found very rarely in our research. Usually the sex differences are wiped out by the personality differences, but not in this particular case. And then, women are getting married later, and they're having children much later, and they're having fewer of them. And so you also have to wonder what their feminine orientation is doing with itself in the interim, roughly speaking. And a lot of it's being expressed as political opinion. Like, and fair enough, that's fine. But it's not fine when it starts to shut down discussion.
And one of the things that's interesting to me about that is that it does tie into the Freudian nightmare of the devouring mother, essentially, which was Freud's, I think, signal contribution to psychopathology. For most of Freud's clients were people who were struggling to get out of the clutches of their family, right? And part of that is human beings are very dependent, right? Because we have this incredibly long period of development, 30 years maybe, but certainly 18 years. And so it's hard to struggle up from infancy, mature, and leave as an independent creature. And lots of people, you see this, if you're a clinician, you see this all the time. People are so tangled up in their families that they can't get away from them. And that's the Oedipal situation that Freud described so brilliantly. And Jung also elaborated on it. A lot of that's a consequence of hyperdependence, right? It's the danger of overprotection. Now there's a rule if you're dealing with elderly people, say in an elder care institution, and the rule is something like, don't do anything for your charges that they can do themselves. It's kind of a harsh rule. If you see someone struggling with their buttons, maybe they're 3 years old, you want to rush over and help. It's like, well, maybe you don't, because they need to learn how to do up their damn buttons. Or if they're 85, they need to maintain their independence as much as possible without your compassion stealing it from them. Okay, well, we could hypothesize that there would be no pathology as a consequence of the female rise to political power. But given that females are human beings too, and we're pretty much rife with pathology, the probability that there'll be a downside is like there is to male participation, which would be more aggressive and aggressiveness and hyper competition. The probability that there would be a downside is extraordinarily high. Well, why wouldn't it be a downside associated with hyperprotectiveness? It's exactly what you'd expect. And then what you see playing out in the political landscape, as far as I can tell, and maybe I'm wrong, is wherever there's an inequality, there's an oppression narrative. And so anyone who's stacks up at the bottom of a hierarchy is a victim/infant, and anyone at the top is an oppressor/predator. So back to the agreeableness issue. There are tyrannies of care. The psychoanalyst said the good mother fails. And what that means is that when your kid is 3 years old, 2 years old, and stumbling around, making mistakes, you back the hell off. And you let them make mistakes. And you don't view the world as infant and predator. And you don't project that onto the political system, because it's not a good idea. Especially for those who you're misdiagnosing as predators.